Hello everyone, my name is Sophia and today I'm here to talk about the books I read in October. So this month I read 10 books in total, and that was a total of 3,760 pages. And before I get into what I thought of those books, what I read, I want to give a little bit of stats. Just so, I don't know, I love stats, so I think you might like them too. This month I read 6 fantasy books, out of which 3 were high fantasy, 2 were urban fantasy, and 1 was historical fantasy. I also read 2 horror books, and 1 short story, and 1 thriller. So I participated in 3 readathons this month. The first one was Nightmare Before TBR, the second one was Trick or Treat-a-thon, and the third one was Lottery-a-thon. And I quite enjoyed being part of all 3 of them. I completed all 3 of them, and as I talk about the books, I'm gonna tell you for which prompt and for which readathon I did them as, you know. I also this month had 1 1-star, I think my first solid 1-star of the year, 1 1.5 star, 1 3-star, 1 3.5 star, 1 4-star, and 5 5-stars. Out of these 10 books, 2 of them were rereads, as in I reread the same book twice this month. And the first time was a reread, so this month I read 5 physical books, 2 ebooks, and 3 audiobooks. 1 of them was middle grade, 3 of them were YA, and 6 of them were adult. So I think that's it. Oh yeah, my average rating was 4 stars, and my most read genre was high fantasy, as usual. So yeah, let's get right into it. The first book I read this month I actually don't own, and it is The Institute by Stephen King. So this is my first actual King novel that I've ever read, and I loved it. I loved it so much. Like, it's about like these kids that are kidnapped and taken to this institute because they have kind of like special abilities, and they're being tested on and pretty much tortured and being separated from their families, from society. And it's kind of like this story about like the resilience of children, and it's so good. Like, the main character, Luke Ellis, the little kid, I love him. I would die for him. I loved him so much. I used The Institute as a book for all 3 readathons, and on the Nightmare Before TBR readathon I used it for the prompt with the isolated or lonely main character. For Trick or Treat-a-thon I used it for the prompt involves a trip or quest, and for Lottery-a-thon I used it for the prompt 20, 3 or less words in the title. Next book I read twice this month, and it's Gideon the Ninth by tamsyn muir. My last video, I'll link it in the description, is a video on why you should read this book. I first read it as an arc on July no, it wasn't for any readathon, but I first read it as an arc on July, so I reread it this month with the intention to tab it, and I love it so much. Like, I love this book. This is like my favorite book of the year, and it's amazing. I can't stop thinking or gushing about it and loving it so much. It's about pretty much lesbian necromancers in space. If you are interested in this book, and even if you aren't, I highly recommend watching that video on why you should read this book, because, I mean, it's so good. Everybody should read this. I mean, if you think this is for you, because this is a really, it's a book with a really niche audience, but I highly recommend it. I read it in the beginning of the month physically and annotated it, and I read it at the end of the month as an audiobook format because I just missed it so much, and I am on a Discord server that was talking about how good the audiobook is, so I was like, I have to try it. So I tried it, and it's great. I loved it. Of course I loved it. It's Gideon the Ninth. This book is fucking perfect. And also, right, readathons. Let me open this shit. I also use this for all 3 readathons, and on the Nightmare Before TBR readathon, I used it for the prompt set in another world. For the Trick or Treat-a-thon, I used it for the prompt gives you the heebie-jeebies, because this has horror elements. And for the Lottery-a-thon, I use it for the prompt 6 will make me feel warm inside, because I already read this book and I know there's a scene that makes me feel very warm inside, and I love it. Next book I read this month was Sakyo Girls, which I loved also. Like, this is a book, I also annotated it. This is a book that doesn't have that high of a rating on Goodreads. It has less than 4 stars, but I really loved it. Like, I loved it a lot. Like, it's a thing for me, I think, to like sapphic horror. So I think that's just one of my things. And I loved it so much. Like, this is about kind of a group of girls on this island that's being haunted by a monster. And it's great. And like, oh my god, it's great. And it's feminist. I wish it was more feminist. I wish it leaned a little bit more on the we are girls thing, you know, and we are powerful. But I loved it all the same. I love Val as a main character. Val is the fucking best. I love the writing style. I love the plot. I love the ending. I think the ending is amazing. And I love the chapters because, like, the rock itself, the sawkill, which is the island they're in, it's kind of sentient. You know, it's kind of a thing. It's kind of real. It has thoughts. And I love it. I love that trope. I love when, like, objects are sentient and there are kind of a little bit of chapters around, like, say things of the rock, how the rock is thinking, and I love it. I think that added a lot to the story, and I overall just really love this book. And yeah, I think you should check it out. For the readathons, because I will forget that, I used it for also the 3 readathons, because like a lot of the prompts I could put it on all the different readathons, so I used it. For the Nightmare Before TBR, I used it for the prompt, read a book with a haunted place or person. For Trick or Treat-a-thon, I used it for someone gets lost or finds themselves. And for Lottery-a-thon, I used it for 18 has a word that starts with S. So yeah, loved it. Absolutely loved it. So good. Next, I read Her Body in Other Parties, which is a collection of short stories by Carmen Maria Machado, and it is kind of, let's see, it's kind of feminist, but it's also magical realism. I read it as an ebook. It's free on Scribd. Free, you have to pay Scribd to use it, but like, it's on Scribd. But it's feminist, it's kind of, it has horror elements. Thing is, this book is very well done. The first story, The Husband Stitch, is like my favorite short story of all time. I loved it. I loved it so much. I think it's such a good story. But there were stories in the middle that I didn't think were the best. I mean, I always thought they had the best message, but not so much the execution. Like, I was either too confused or they were either too long or too different of the stories, and I don't always think, I mean, the book is too smart for me. 100%, I'm too dumb for it. Like, I kept saying, like, I'm too dumb for this. I don't understand this metaphor. Because, like, I am also 16, you know? I can't expect myself to be like one of those scholars. It's like, oh, this means blah, blah. I don't know shit. So, while I did enjoy some of the stories, especially the first and the last one was good. I was really confused throughout most of them. But yeah, I would recommend it, especially Husband Stitch and the last one, which I don't remember the name, which are really good. But, I mean, only check it out if you want to check it out. I used this book for 2 readathons. I used it for The Nightmare Before TBR on the prompt, read a book with green on the cover, and Lottery-a-thon as the prompt 3. Read a book with a female lead older than 17. Next, I read other short story, but this one is not a collection, just a short story called Blasphemy by, holy shit, I'm not saying the author's names, but I put every single book I mentioned in the description, so that's fine. By TJ Klune. It's like online, you can read it online. It's like 50 pages, but it's so good. It's so weird, like, it's so weird. It's a story about, like, Satan. If you're Catholic, you're probably not gonna like it, but it's a story about Satan, and Satan's like, he's really underwhelmed by his job, you know? He's like, I don't feel that spark anymore, so he decides to go and do, like, the crossroad thing, you know, to, like see what people wish for, and he ends up meeting Jimmy. I think his name is Jimmy. He ends up meeting this guy who has a shirt that says power bottom, and they end up really hitting it off, and it's really funny. And it's really interesting, really funny. I loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I haven't been saying my rating. But yeah, I haven't been saying my rating. The Institute, I gave 5 out of 5 stars. Gideon the Ninth, of course, I gave 5 out of 5 stars. Sakyo Girls, I gave 5 out of 5 stars. Her Body and Other Parties, I gave 3.8 out of 5 stars because of the average. And Blasphemy, I gave 5 out of 5 stars because I loved it. I just loved it. I used Blasphemy for 2 readathons. I used it for the Trick or Treat-a-thon on the prompt with the red, orange, yellow, or brown in the cover. And for the lottery-a-thon in the prompt, 13, red and 1 sitting. So, next book I read was Serpent and Dove by Shelby mahurin, and did not like it. Really did not. I have a few tabs, but they're mostly just like observations on stuff that I wasn't liking so much, and I have a full dedicated review. I'm not gonna spend so much time here, but this book is pretty much about this witch and this witch hunter are forced to get married, and she's running from her past, and he's like having struggles with his honor, and I call it the Nina Matthias dynamic from Six of Crows, but worse. I have a full dedicated review on why I think this had a lot of potential but didn't live up to it. I'd recommend you watch it if you're interested. If you're not, just don't. But yeah, I was really disappointed. I really wish it had more depth, which is my main complaint. It's so surface level, even though it's 500 pages. But yeah, this one. I used Serpent and Dove for 2 readathons. I used it for the Nightmare Before TBR on the prompt with black on the cover. And I used it for Trick or Treat-a-thon in the prompt with an animal on the cover because this is a snake. And yeah, I gave it 1.5 out of 5 stars. Next book I read was An Unwanted Guest by Shari Lapena, and it is a thriller like Agatha Christie style. There are these people like isolated on a hotel because it's a snowstorm outside, and they're isolated and people are dying. So pretty much it. Very Agatha Christie, very And Then There Were None, which is one of my favorite books. But like, that was so underwhelming. Yeah, it was weirdly underwhelming because I don't know, I wish the plot twists were better. I wish the killer was somebody else. I wish it had more suspense. I wish it had more like, no, character was pretty good, but like I wanted more from it. One thing that I very much enjoyed on this book was it was like multiple perspective, and it was how Shari Lapena was able to get in the character's head and write as the character, not as like somebody observing. Like even though if the person was not a good person, she would get in their head and write as them thinking they're righteous in their thought process, which I thought was really good. But like overall, I just wasn't wowed by it. I gave 2.5 out of 5 stars. And I used Unwanted Guests for 1 readathon, and I used it for the Nightmare Before TBR readathon on the Read a Book with the Holiday Theme prompt. This is like, it's not very much holiday theme. I kind of cheated, yes, but whatever. We're over that. The next book I read was Wilder Girls by Rory Power, and this is my 1 star of the month. Even though this cover is like the prettiest cover I've ever seen, thought this was really underwhelming, didn't like it. I finished it in class, turned to my friend and said like, this is shit, because I hated the ending. Overall, this is about like these girls, they're kind of quarantined in their school because there's a plague breaking out and they have to survive. So pretty much that. People call it a feminist Lord of the Flies. I don't know what's feminist about this because there was something at the end which is not feminist at all, which I hated. And so why call this book feminist? I hated it. So yeah, very much surface level, very much not explored well enough. the more they got away from the school itself, the less interesting it became. So yeah, and this book was just really underwhelming. I really wanted to like this, hence I bought it in fucking hardcover. I don't have enough money to keep buying books that I don't like, but I ended up with 2 this month. 2 in hardcover, no less. Oh, come on. And for example, Claire Legrand, the author of Sakyo Girls, has a blurb back here, like, praising this book, and I'm like, how? This book is so surface level, it's so underwhelming, it's so bland. I don't like it. Not even the romance saved it. Oh, what can you do? I used Wilder Girls, this pretty cover and this not so pretty book. For two readathons, I used it for The Nightmare Before TBR on With a Murder, and I used it for Lotteryathon on the prompt 7 with green on the cover. The next book I read, and last book actually, because I read, after this I only read Gideon the Ninth, which was like the second book I talked about in this readathon, so I'm not going to talk about it again. I already said I loved it, but like the last book I'm going to talk about on this wrap-up is The Girl Who Drank the Moon by, who's this by? Kelly Barnhill. And this is pretty much about this girl who was like put out as a sacrifice for this witch when she was a baby, but the witch took her in and gave her moonlight, which is pretty much magic, and the witch like grew up with her, and I really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I have a soft spot for stories of hope and love and family about children, which are like most middle grade end up being about that or friendship. And I quite enjoyed this. I enjoyed this a lot. It's very whimsical, which I love. It's very, the writing was pretty. I don't know what I wish happened more. I don't know. I think this book is really good. I just didn't have an emotional attachment to it, so I couldn't give it 5 stars. But I really did enjoy this, and I highly recommend it if you're into middle grade. The main character is black, I think, so that's a huge plus, even though the writer's white, but the main character's black. And this won the John Newbery Medal. And overall, I just think this book was really, really good. And like, it's so whimsical, and if you like whimsical stories, pick this up because this is great. And like one of the few middle grades I read this year, and I really enjoyed it. Oh, also, I used it for one readathon. I used it for The Nightmare Before TBR on the prompt with purple on the cover because this writing is purple and this is purple. So yeah, it has purple. So yeah, those were the books I read this month. Overall, it was a good reading month, even though there were a few, like 3 not so good books. And I mean, I'm glad I read most of them. My favorites, true, I don't count rereads as favorites, so my favorites were Sakyo Girls and The Institute by Stephen King. This is by Claire Legrand. And The Institute by Stephen King. Those were my 2 favorites. I love them so much. And yeah, my name is Sophia, and I'll see you next time. Bye!